that prey.
Whoa! Hey, Jesus, man. What's your language too, eh?
Oh, piss off, fuckwit.
What? You want to start some shit? Walking dickhead.
Well...
I'll be back in a minute, all right?
Okay.
Run, you little shit.
The show centers on the life of Ray Shoesmith, a hitman who juggles his criminal work with the responsibilities of his personal life. Ray has a 7-year-old daughter, Britney, and an ex-wife, Jinta. He's also the primary caregiver for his sick brother, Bruce. The episode begins with Ray having a meeting with his boss, Freddie's associate, Maddie. Ray questions why Maddie failed to place a bet on Freddie's gambling. At first, Maddie tries to evade the issue, but after Ray's persistent questioning, he admits his mistake. To teach Maddie a lesson, Ray pushes him down the stairs. Later, Ray meets Freddie at a nightclub to collect his payment. Freddie doesn't have the money at the moment, possibly due to gambling losses. Instead, Freddie tells Ray he can collect $10,000 from someone who owes him money and keep it for himself. Ray agrees but requests an extra $1,000 for his efforts. Freddie agrees and sends Nick, one of his crew members, to assist Ray. Ray and Nick drive to Ashfield to find the debtor, Terry. Nick begins by beating Terry mercilessly, but the elderly man refuses to pay, claiming he has no money. However, he promises to have it within a week. Ray, thinking of a more effective approach, asks for Terry's wallet. Upon inspecting it, he sees a family photo and writes down Terry's address. Ray threatens to visit Terry's family if the debt isn't paid immediately, which frightens Terry enough to promise to repay the money right away. The next day, Ray walks his dog in a park where he meets a woman named Ally, who is also walking her dog. They exchange small talk and both find each other attractive. Later, Ray visits his daughter, Britney, at his ex-wife's home. He drives Britney to see her uncle Bruce, who has a close relationship with her and often spoils her with gifts. One night, while working security at a nightclub, Ray's best friend Gary shows up. They talk privately, and Gary confesses that his Russian wife, Tatiana, found an adult movie DVD at home and became furious. To avoid trouble, Gary lied to Tatiana, claiming the DVD belonged to Ray. Surprisingly, Tatiana believed him. Gary asks Ray to visit his house and confirm the story to Tatiana. Reluctantly, Ray agrees. When Ray arrives at Gary's house, he admits to Tatiana that the DVD is his. Tatiana scolds him and returns the DVD to Ray, who later throws it in the trash. However, Gary retrieves it and takes it back home without his wife noticing. The next day, Ray is out spending time with his daughter, Britney. Two young boys bump into her on the street. Instead of apologizing, the boys act rudely toward Ray and even throw foul language his way. Ray brushes it off for the moment and takes Britney back to the car. However, when he spots those same boys hanging out nearby a little later, he tells Britney to stay inside the vehicle, claiming he's just stepping out to buy a newspaper. In reality, Ray heads straight toward the pair and suddenly attacks one of them, leaving the other terrified and fleeing. Unfortunately, a woman witnesses the assault. As Ray chases after the boy who ran, he happens to bump into Ally inside a supermarket. During their brief exchange, Ray learns she's a paramedic, and this time he doesn't waste the chance, he asks for her number. The story then cuts to another scene where businessman Luke Henson finishes his morning jog and returns to his car. Out of nowhere, Ray ambushes him, forcing Luke into the trunk of his vehicle. He drives Luke deep into the woods, orders him to dig a hole, and once it's ready, Ray executes him on the spot before burying the body in the same pit Luke dug. One morning back at home, Britney asks her father if Santa Claus is real. Ray, unable to lie, bluntly tells her that Santa doesn't exist. When Britney goes on to ask about Jesus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy, Ray softens his approach. Not wanting to completely crush her imagination, he claims that unicorns are real. He even spins a tale about once driving to the Blue Mountains where he supposedly saw a unicorn take flight into the sky. Soon after, police officers show up at Ray's house and hand him a court summons for the earlier incident involving the two young men. As punishment, he's ordered to attend anger management therapy sessions. That evening, Ray heads over to Freddy's nightclub, the Playhouse, where his boss reveals troubling news: Luke wasn't actually the intended target. Hearing this, Ray feels immense guilt and lashes out, demanding Freddy give him the correct names from now on. Later, Ray goes on a date with Ally. The two bond, sharing stories about their pasts. Ally confides that she was married at 21 but the marriage didn't work out, while Ray jokingly remarks she dodged a bullet. Their evening ends at Ray's home, where they grow physically intimate. The following day, Ray receives a distressing call from the hospital. His close friend Gary has slipped into a coma. At the hospital, Ray consoles Gary's wife Tatiana and asks his brother-in-law, Vicilei, for details. Vicilei claims they were brokering an illegal arms deal when some men barged in, assaulted Gary, and stole the weapons. But Ray quickly senses inconsistencies. Vicilei insists he fought the attackers, yet his hands show no bruises, and strangely, he escaped completely unharmed while Gary was badly beaten. Suspicious, Ray later storms into Vasilei's house and brutally interrogates him. At first, Vicilei denies any wrongdoing, but when Ray threatens his life, he finally admits the truth: he and his partner, Hassan, orchestrated the setup. They never expected Gary to take such a severe beating. Furious, Ray forces Vicilei to lure Hassan over. Once Hassan arrives, Ray pulls a gun on him, and out of fear, Hassan confirms Vasilei's story: the rest of the gang were the ones who nearly killed Gary. Using the intel, Ray tracks down the culprits and mercilessly kills two of them. The very next day, Gary miraculously wakes from his coma and expresses gratitude to Ray for looking out for him. Later, Ray visits his ex's house to spend time with Britney. But his ex angrily confronts him about telling their daughter that Jesus wasn't real, since she and her new husband intend to raise Britney as a Christian. Ray responds that he was only being truthful and doesn't want his daughter growing up believing in fairy tales. After the tense exchange, he drives off. When the court-ordered anger management session begins, Ray reluctantly attends, knowing prison is the alternative. But from the very first meeting, he feels out of place. The room is full of men who physically abuse their wives and children, which doesn't align with his issues. Ray explains he doesn't just have anger problems but impulse control, and insists he doesn't belong in that environment. This provokes another attendee, leading to a near fight until the therapist intervenes. Ray's troubles don't stop there. Freddy later informs him that the men he killed for putting Gary in a coma were part of a crew tied to Davos, the brother of Freddy's son-in-law. To prevent a gang war, Freddy demands Ray meet with Davos to smooth things over. Meanwhile, Vicilei, high on drugs, breaks into Gary's home intent on robbing his safe. Gary, newly discharged from the hospital, secretly manages to send an SOS text to Ray, who happens to be out shopping with Ally. Gary stalls by pretending he's forgotten the safe's combination, but Ray soon arrives to rescue him. A struggle breaks out, and Vicilei is knocked down a flight of stairs. During the scuffle, Gary wrestles Vasilei's gun away and seemingly shoots him in the head. Just as Tatiana comes home, panic sets in. While Gary prepares to chop up Vasilei's body to dispose of it, Ray tries to cover the mess from Tatiana. But to their horror, Vicilei isn't dead. The bullet had ricocheted off his skull, leaving him only unconscious. When Ray attempts to cut him up, Vicilei suddenly wakes, bolts upright, and flees the house. Once Tatiana learns what Vicilei tried to do, she storms after him in fury. During this time, Ray simply walks off, unwilling to get tangled in matters involving another man's family. Despite his background in organized crime, Ray carries a softer side, particularly when it comes to his daughter, Britney. He makes an effort to attend her games, spends quality time with her, and often takes her to his brother's house so she can stay connected to her roots. Ray even goes as far as introducing Britney to his new girlfriend, Ally, showing how important both women are in his life. Later that night, Ray finally sits down with Davos, a relative of Freddy and an established crime boss whose men Ray had previously beaten up. The meeting, however, turns sour almost immediately. Ray is only there out of loyalty to Freddy, but with Davos opening the conversation by outright refusing to shake his hand, Ray already considers him as good as dead in his book. More than anything, Ray values respect, and the insult does not sit well. Enraged, Davos later orders 3 of his men to go after Ray. In the following sequence, Ray and Ally are out together shopping at a supermarket. Once they finish and return to their car, 2 men deliberately block him from reversing out of his parking space. When their words turn abusive, Ray decides to handle things his own way. He steps out of the car and unleashes a brutal beating on them until they scatter in fear. Ally, stunned and unsettled, sees a darker side of Ray she hadn't witnessed before. That night, when she confronts him about what happened, Ray calmly insists that he was only doing society a favor by punishing men who prey on others. Later, Ray notices Davos' men watching his house. To gain the upper hand, he lures them into an isolated location. He drives to an abandoned factory, puts on a bulletproof vest, and arms himself with a compact submachine gun Gary had recently gifted him. When the men arrive, Ray opens fire without hesitation, mowing them down until none remain. After the bloodshed, he returns home to Ally. She detects a strange smell of gunpowder on him but cannot place it. The next day, Ray and Gary make plans to rob a drug dealer. They want Nick to serve as their getaway driver. Nick pretends to agree to the plan, but once he excuses himself to use the bathroom, he attempts to secretly make a phone call. His effort fails when he accidentally drops his phone in the toilet. Covering up, he tells Ray and Gary he's stepping out to buy cigarettes, but instead he sneaks off to a phone booth to place a call. Ray, having followed him, catches Nick in the act. It turns out Nick is actually an undercover cop. Since he isn't armed, Nick quickly surrenders. Ray and Gary drive him into a remote wilderness area, debating what to do with him. Gary avoids dirty work, so the decision falls on Ray. In the end, Ray spares Nick, deciding he doesn't want the burden of a cop's death on his hands, especially since Nick hasn't actually betrayed him yet. Not long after, Ray is suddenly abducted by Dave and Bobby, 2 hitmen hired by Davos. Thinking quickly, Ray stalls by telling them about a strongbox hidden in a certain location, claiming it holds more money than their current contract is worth. Secretly, the hitmen plot to steal the cash while still turning Ray over to Davos. Eventually, Ray leads them to the strongbox but pretends not to remember the combination. He suggests they buy a gas-cutting torch from a nearby hardware store. Forced to wait, Ray is locked in the car's trunk while Dave and Bobby head inside, Dave buying the torch, Bobby stopping for cigarettes. When they return, to their shock, the car is gone. A flashback reveals what happened. 2 petty criminals had spotted the vehicle outside, stolen it, and unknowingly driven off with Ray still locked in the trunk. They take the car to a mechanic, hoping to strip it for parts and sell them. The mechanic agrees to pay once he checks everything, so the crooks remove the strongbox and leave. While inspecting the car, the mechanic hears banging noises from inside, Ray trying desperately to get out. Unwilling to deal with trouble, the mechanic abandons the car deep in the woods. After several attempts, Ray finally frees himself from the trunk. He gets behind the wheel and later stumbles into a fast food restaurant, where he spots the same 2 crooks with his stolen strongbox. He tails them, manages to reclaim the box, but his relief is short-lived. Dave and Bobby reappear, recapturing him. They insist the original plan continues, driving Ray out into the forest where Davos awaits. There, Ray is forced to dig his own grave. Davos pays Dave his share for delivering him, but tension erupts when Bobby blurts out that they also have Ray's strongbox. Furious, Davos demands they split that money too. Bobby cuts into it with the torch, but the box has been booby-trapped. It explodes, injuring everyone in the area. Since Ray was farther away digging, he suffers the least damage. Seizing the opportunity, he kills both Davos and Bobby. Out of respect, however, he spares Dave, knowing they share a similar background. Dave confesses that his only motive was to earn enough money to provide for his family and his pregnant wife, who is expecting a son soon. Grateful, Dave says he owes Ray his life before escaping into the night. In the closing moment, Ray receives a call from Ally. He tells her he'll be late meeting her that evening, using work obligations as his excuse.